My wife confessed to me that she cheated on me with her ex and is pregnant by him. When I filed for divorce, she claimed in court that the child is mine. I never thought one random Friday night would flip my entire world upside down. If you asked me a week ago, I'd have said my life was stable, maybe even happy. But now, I don't even know which way is up. Everything started to crumble after what I found out at Noah's party. Noah's been my best friend since high school. He's one of those guys who can host a party and have everyone show up without question. That night, I was there with my girlfriend, Emma. We'd been together for about 2 years, and yeah, things hadn't been perfect recently, but I thought that was just life. You don't stay in the honeymoon phase forever, right? But something had fell off with Emma for a while. I chalked it up to her being stressed with work or something, nothing too serious. We arrived at the party separately, which wasn't unusual. She said she had to finish something at the office and would meet me there. I didn't think much of it. I got there first, had a couple of beers, and was chatting with Noah and a few others when Emma walked in. She looked great, as always. Emma could pull off casual better than anyone else. But as the night went on, I started noticing her acting strangely. Every time I glanced at her across the room, she was on her phone, texting away, smiling to herself. At one point, I caught her slipping outside, and I figured she was just taking a call or needed some air. I should have known something was wrong then, but I was too distracted with drinks and conversation. It wasn't until later that night when Noah pulled me aside, his face dead serious, that I started to get a bad feeling. Noah's the kind of guy who can keep his cool in most situations, but tonight he looked like he had something he didn't want to say. "Liam, man, I gotta talk to you," he said, pulling me into the hallway away from everyone else. "Sure," I said. "What's up?" He hesitated. That's when I knew whatever he was about to tell me wasn't good. "It's about Emma," he started, lowering his voice. My heart started racing. "What about her?" Noah rubbed the back of his neck, looking at the ground. "Dude, I didn't know if I should even say anything, but you're my best friend. You need to know. I overheard something earlier tonight. Emma, she's been seeing her ex." I blinked. "Her ex? You mean James?" "James, the guy she swore she was done with before we started dating? That James?" Noah nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Yeah, man. Apparently, it's been going on for a while." I couldn't believe it. My stomach twisted into knots, and I felt the room tilt a little. "What the hell are you talking about?" Noah took a deep breath. "I heard her talking to one of her friends earlier, in the kitchen. She didn't know I was there. She told them she's pregnant." I froze. Pregnant? Emma hadn't said anything to me about that. How could she? "And, Liam, it's not yours," Noah added quietly, the final punch landing straight in my gut. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. My ears started ringing. Pregnant? With James's child? And she hadn't told me? What was she planning to do? My heart raced as anger, confusion, and shock all crashed into me at once. I could barely get a sentence out. "Are you serious?" Noah just nodded, looking like he wished he didn't have to tell me. I felt sick. Every moment with Emma, every conversation, every time I'd kissed her, it all felt like a lie now. I could barely process what he was saying. "What did she say?" I managed to ask, my voice coming out rough. "She told her friend she was going to have you raise the baby. Like, she planned to keep it from you and just, I don't know, have you believe it was yours." That's when everything went cold. All this time, she'd been lying to me. About seeing James, about the baby, about our entire relationship. And she was going to make me raise another man's child? I felt like I was about to explode. I turned away from Noah, pacing down the hallway, trying to get a grip. My hands were shaking, my vision blurred with rage. I stormed out of the house without another word to Noah, ignoring his calls after me. I needed air. I needed to get the hell out of there. I found myself walking down the street, the cool night air doing nothing to calm the storm in my head. I didn't know what to do. Confront her right away? Wait until we got home? I didn't even know if I could look her in the face without losing it. But I couldn't avoid her forever. I had to talk to her. I had to know if it was all true. I pulled out my phone and shot her a text. "Where are you? We need to talk." She replied almost instantly. "I'm outside." "Why?" I found her standing near the driveway, her phone in her hand, looking as innocent as ever. When she saw me coming, she smiled. But that smile disappeared the second she saw my face. "What's wrong?" she asked, taking a step closer. I could barely hold it together. "Is it true?" Her eyes narrowed. "What? Are you cheating on me with James?" Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes darting around like she was searching for a way out of this conversation. "Who told you that?" I felt my blood boiling. "So it's true. You've been sleeping with him." She didn't answer right away, which was all the confirmation I needed. My hands clenched into fists. "How long?" I demanded. Emma bit her lip, her eyes welling up with tears. "Liam, I didn't mean for it to happen like this." "How long?" I repeated, my voice rising. "A few months," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A few months? And you were going to let me believe the baby was mine?" Emma's eyes filled with panic. "Liam, please, I was going to tell you." "When? After the kid was born?" I shot back, my anger finally spilling over. "How could you do this to me? How could you lie like that?" She started crying then, real tears this time, but I didn't care. I couldn't care. Not after everything she'd done. "Liam, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you." "You didn't want to hurt me? You were going to make me raise another man's kid, Emma? What kind of person does that?" She just stood there sobbing, but I couldn't feel anything anymore. I was too numb, too angry, too broken. I turned away from her, unable to look at her anymore. "Liam, please," she begged, reaching out for me, but I shook her off. "I'm done," I said, my voice cold. "We're done." And with that, I walked away. I didn't look back, not once. I didn't care where she went or what she did. All I knew was that my life had just shattered into pieces, and I had no idea how I was going to pick them up. The weekend after Noah's party was the longest, most excruciating stretch of time I'd ever experienced. I spent those 2 days wrestling with everything I'd found out. Emma had lied to me for months. She was pregnant, and the baby wasn't mine. She had planned to trap me in this twisted lie, making me believe I was the father of a child that belonged to her ex, James. Every time I thought about it, my chest tightened, anger and confusion overwhelming me. I couldn't let it go without confronting her. The moment I had stormed off from the party, I realized I needed answers. So that Sunday night, I texted her, telling her we needed to talk in person. It felt like a final stand. She agreed to meet at my apartment. I didn't want to face her on neutral ground. I needed to be in control this time. The knock on the door came earlier than I expected. I wasn't ready. Not really. But I had no choice now. I opened the door, and there she stood, Emma, looking pale and nervous, with tear-streaked eyes and a vulnerable expression that almost made me feel bad for her. Almost. "Hey," she said, her voice small. I stepped aside and motioned for her to come in. She hesitated before walking inside, her eyes darting around the room like she was unsure of what would happen next. The tension between us was suffocating. I crossed my arms and leaned against the back of the couch, keeping a safe distance from her. I needed that space. I needed to keep my head clear. "We need to talk," I said flatly. Emma nodded, her voice cracking. "Liam, I know I screwed up." I cut her off. "Screwed up? You lied to me for months. You were cheating on me, and you're pregnant with James's kid. And you were going to let me believe it was mine." Her face crumpled, and she stepped forward, reaching out like she wanted to hold my hand. I flinched back, anger surging up again. "Don't," I warned. "Liam, I was going to tell you," she said, her voice pleading. I didn't know how." I let out a bitter laugh. "Didn't know how? How about the truth? How about not lying to the person you supposedly love?" Her lower lip trembled. "It's not that simple. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't plan it." "Right," I said sarcastically. "You didn't mean to cheat on me, didn't mean to get pregnant with someone else's kid, didn't mean to drag me into your mess." She wiped at her eyes, trying to keep herself together. "Liam, I know it sounds awful. I'm not proud of what I did, but that doesn't change the fact that I care about you. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." I scoffed. Funny way of showing it. She took a deep breath and sat down on the couch, folding her hands in her lap like she was trying to steady herself. Liam, I'm not going to lie to you anymore. Yes, I was seeing James again. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake, but he's not what I want. You are. I didn't even know how to respond to that. You're kidding, right? You think that changes anything? You're carrying his baby, Emma. She shook her head quickly. That doesn't mean anything. James isn't father material. You know that. He's reckless, irresponsible. He's not the type of guy who can raise a child. But you're stable, dependable, everything a father should be. That's why I wanted you to be the father. My jaw dropped. That's why? Because I'm more convenient for you? You want me to play daddy to someone else's kid because I'm a safe option? No, it's not like that, she said quickly, her voice rising in panic. I wanted us to be a family, Liam. I know I messed up, but you're the one I want to be with. I love you. I shook my head, trying to make sense of the insanity she was spewing. Love? How can you even say that after what you did? You don't betray someone you love like that. She leaned forward, desperation in her eyes. I made a mistake, yes, but it doesn't erase everything we've built together. We've had 2 years, Liam. 2 years of memories, of being there for each other. That has to count for something. I felt like I was losing my mind. So, what? You think we can just pretend like none of this happened? You think I'm going to stick around and raise your kid with you after what you've done? Tears streamed down her face now, but I couldn't find it in myself to care. Not after everything. I know it's a lot to ask, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I know you, Liam. You're a good person. You're the kind of man who can look past this and see the bigger picture. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The bigger picture? Emma, there is no bigger picture. You lied to me, betrayed me, and now you want me to pick up the pieces and fix your life? That's not happening. She wiped at her tears again, but they just kept coming. Liam, please. You know I didn't plan this. James doesn't even care about the baby. He hasn't wanted anything to do with it since I told him. But you can be the father. We can still have a future. I stood up, pacing back and forth, running my hands through my hair, trying to process everything. You don't get it, do you? You used me. You were going to let me believe that kid was mine. How can I ever trust you again? Emma stood up now, reaching for me again, but I stepped back. Liam, I'm sorry. I'll do anything to make this right. I'll cut off all contact with James. I'll go to therapy. Whatever it takes. I don't want to lose you. I shook my head. It's too late for that. You've already lost me. Her face crumpled again, and she collapsed back onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. But I couldn't comfort her. I couldn't bring myself to even feel sympathy. Not after everything she had done. You need to leave, I said quietly. She looked up, eyes wide. What? You need to leave, I repeated, louder this time. I can't do this. I can't be with you. She stood up slowly, her whole body trembling. Liam, please don't do this. We can work through this. We can. No. I cut her off. We can't. She stood there for a moment, staring at me, like she was waiting for me to change my mind. But I didn't. After what felt like an eternity, she finally nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Okay, she whispered, turning to leave. I'm sorry, Liam. I really am. I didn't say anything as she walked to the door. The sound of it closing behind her was like a final nail in the coffin. I stood there in the empty apartment, trying to catch my breath, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. The woman I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with had been lying to me for months. She was pregnant with another man's child, and she had the audacity to try and convince me to raise it with her, like nothing had ever happened. I sank down onto the couch, my head in my hands. My life had just exploded, and I didn't even know where to begin picking up the pieces. After Emma left my apartment that night, I thought it was over. I had said my piece. We were done. I figured she'd go back to James, or maybe take some time to figure her life out. I didn't expect what came next. The first few days after our breakup were quiet. Too quiet. I didn't hear from Emma, and I didn't try to reach out. I was drowning in my thoughts, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. I felt like I'd been living in some kind of sick reality show. How could the woman I'd loved for 2 years have lied to me so easily, made me believe we had a future when she'd already betrayed me? But that peace didn't last. Not for long. The first sign that Emma wasn't going to let go was when she showed up at my apartment, unannounced. A week later, I was getting ready for work, eating a quick breakfast when there was a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my heart sank when I opened it and saw her standing there. She looked rough. Her hair was messy, her eyes red from crying, and she was holding a coffee cup in one hand, like she was trying to make things normal again. "Liam," she started, her voice shaky but determined. "Can we talk?" I stared at her, anger bubbling up again. "There's nothing left to talk about, Emma." She stepped forward, pushing the door open slightly, like she wasn't ready to give up. "Please, just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I sighed, stepping aside. I didn't want to talk, but maybe if I let her say whatever she needed to say, she'd finally leave me alone. She walked in and sat on the couch, looking around like she hadn't been here 100 times before. I stayed standing, arms crossed, waiting. "Well, what is it?" Emma bit her lip, fiddling with the coffee cup in her hands. "Liam, I can't stop thinking about what happened. I know I messed up. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I love you. I can't just let you go." I shook my head, trying to keep my cool. "Emma, you don't love me. If you did, you wouldn't have cheated. You wouldn't have lied to me." She flinched, her eyes filling with tears again. I know I screwed up, but that doesn't change how I feel about you. I made a mistake, but I still want to be with you. I still want us to be a family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A family? You want me to play house with you and raise James's kid? After everything you've done?" "It's not like that," she insisted, standing up and reaching for me. "I know it's a lot to ask, but we had something real, Liam. You can't just throw that away." I stepped back, out of her reach. "Emma, we're done. I don't trust you. I can't trust you. You need to move on." She stared at me, her eyes wide, like she couldn't believe I was rejecting her. For a moment, I thought she was going to break down, but instead, she nodded slowly, backing toward the door. "Okay, I get it, but I'm not giving up on us." With that, she turned and left, leaving me standing there, stunned. I thought that was the end of it, that once she walked out, she'd finally understand that we were over. But I couldn't have been more wrong. The next few weeks were a nightmare. At first, it was small things. Texts that I ignored, voicemails that I deleted without listening to. She kept showing up at my apartment, knocking on the door like we were still dating. I stopped answering after the third time, hoping she'd get the hint. But Emma didn't know how to quit. One night, around 10 p.m., just as I was about to go to bed, I heard another knock. I groaned, knowing exactly who it was. I didn't even bother checking the peephole. "Emma, go home." I called through the door, but she didn't leave. She knocked again, more insistently this time. "Liam, please. Just open the door. We need to talk." I couldn't take it anymore. I yanked the door open, glaring at her. "What do you want?" She looked up at me with those tear-filled eyes, her hands trembling. "Liam, I miss you. I miss us. Can't we at least talk?" I shook my head. "Emma, it's late. You need to leave." Her face crumpled again, and for a second, I thought she was going to collapse right there in the hallway. "I can't do this without you. I can't raise this baby alone. Liam, please, let's try again." I felt a flash of anger, sharp and bitter. "This isn't my problem, Emma. You made your bed. Now you have to lie in it." Her breath hitched, and she took a step back like I'd slapped her. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly drowned out by the exhaustion of dealing with her constant attempts to get me back. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." But sorry wasn't enough. Not anymore. It wasn't just my apartment that became her stalking ground. Emma started showing up at my job, too. The first time she came by my office, my coworker, Daniel, came over to my desk looking confused. "Hey man, there's a woman outside asking for you. Says her name's Emma?" I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't told anyone at work about the breakup. I didn't want to deal with the questions or the awkwardness. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. Standing up, I found her waiting in the lobby, holding a bag of what looked like lunch from my favorite sandwich shop. She smiled when she saw me, but I couldn't bring myself to smile back. Liam, I brought you lunch, she said, holding the bag out like it was some kind of peace offering. I didn't take it. Emma, what are you doing here? You can't just show up at my job. Her smile faltered. I thought maybe we could talk. I know I shouldn't have come, but I didn't know how else to get you to listen. I rubbed a hand over my face, trying to stay calm. Emma, you need to stop this. You're making things worse. She blinked, like she couldn't comprehend what I was saying. But I'm trying to make things better. I'm trying to show you that I still care. I let out a frustrated sigh. Showing up unannounced at my apartment and my job isn't helping. It's making me want to stay as far away from you as possible. Her eyes welled up again, and she took a shaky breath. I just don't know what else to do. I crossed my arms, looking at her sternly. Emma, this has to stop. We're done. You need to move on. She stood there for a moment, her face crumbling as the reality finally seemed to hit her. She dropped the lunch bag on the chair next to her and walked out without another word. I watched her leave, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over me. It wasn't easy, but I hoped that was the last time I'd have to deal with her. But, of course, it wasn't. Things escalated after that. She started showing up at random places I'd never expect her. I'd be out grabbing coffee with a friend, and she'd just appear, as if by coincidence. But it wasn't coincidence. She was watching me, keeping tabs on where I was. It became suffocating. One evening, I was out with Noah, trying to unwind after a long week. We were at a bar downtown, just catching up over a couple of beers, when Noah leaned over and said, "Dude, don't look now, but Emma's here." I stiffened, my grip tightening around my glass. "You've got to be kidding me." "Nope," Noah said, nodding toward the other end of the bar. I turned slightly and saw her sitting there, watching me. She wasn't even trying to hide it. She didn't approach, just sat there, staring. It made my skin crawl. "This is getting ridiculous," Noah muttered. "You need to do something about this." I nodded, feeling the frustration bubbling up again. "Yeah, I know." I couldn't take it anymore. I walked over to her, not caring if it made a scene. "What the hell are you doing here, Emma?" She looked up at me, her eyes wide and innocent. "I didn't know you'd be here. I just came to get a drink." "Bullshit," I snapped. "You've been following me. You need to stop. This is harassment." Her face paled, and she opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. "I'm serious, Emma. If you don't leave me alone, I'll call the cops." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time, I didn't care. I was done. Done with the tears, the apologies, the stalking. She had pushed me too far. She stood up, shaking her head. "I'm sorry, Liam. I didn't know what else to do." "Leave me alone," I said firmly, turning and walking away before she could say anything else. The next day, I blocked her number. I blocked her on social media. I even considered moving to a new apartment just to get away from her. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Maybe, just maybe, she'd finally gotten the message. But then I came home that night and found her waiting outside my apartment building, her arms wrapped around her stomach, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Liam, please," she called out as I approached. "Just hear me out." I ignored her, walking straight past her and into the building. I heard her call my name again, but I didn't stop. I was done. I couldn't deal with her anymore. It wasn't healthy for either of us. The next day, I got a restraining order. I thought I had seen the last of Emma after getting the restraining order. The weeks following that final confrontation were the first peaceful moments I'd had in months. She had finally stopped calling, stopped showing up at my apartment, and for the first time, I started to feel like my life was getting back on track. I focused on work, caught up with friends I had neglected, and even started to feel like I could move on from the whole ordeal. But just as I was beginning to think Emma was finally out of my life for good, I received a letter in the mail that changed everything. It was a plain, white envelope with no return address. I didn't think much of it until I opened it and saw the official letterhead from a law office. My heart sank as I read the first line. "Dear Mr. Liam Matthews, You are hereby notified that Ms. Emma Riley is seeking child support for her unborn child, for whom you are listed as the presumed father. I had to sit down. I reread the letter 3 times, each word hitting me like a hammer. Child support? She was suing me for child support? I couldn't believe it. She knew the baby wasn't mine. I knew the baby wasn't mine. Hell, no one knew it too. But here it was, in black and white. Emma was trying to legally rope me into her mess. I immediately called the lawyer listed in the letter, a woman named Natalie Harper. I didn't bother hiding my anger. What the hell is going on? I'm not the father of that baby. I'm not even with Emma anymore. Ms. Harper's voice was cool and professional. Mr. Matthews, I understand this is a stressful situation, but we are acting based on the information provided by Ms. Riley. She has named you as the presumed father, which, under state law, means you are required to provide financial support unless otherwise proven. My head was spinning. But I'm not the father. We broke up before she even told me she was pregnant. She cheated on me with her ex. Ms. Harper paused. If that's the case, then you'll need to provide evidence to that effect in court. I would suggest you contact a family law attorney to represent you. We can discuss the matter further in front of a judge. I hung up, furious. The audacity of Emma to try and pin this on me. There was no way I was paying a dime for a child that wasn't mine. I immediately started looking for a lawyer. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. The court date came quicker than I expected. I hired a family lawyer named Robert Hastings, a sharp, no-nonsense guy in his 40s with a reputation for being ruthless in the courtroom. He was exactly who I needed. From the moment I told him the situation, he assured me we had nothing to worry about, but I still couldn't shake the anxiety that gnawed at me. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse feeling like I was in some kind of nightmare. Emma was already there, sitting with her lawyer, a young guy who looked fresh out of law school. She was dressed in a modest maternity outfit, her belly prominently showing now. She had that same wide-eyed, innocent expression she always wore when she wanted sympathy. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. When the judge called us in, I could barely look at her. Every time I caught a glimpse of her, I felt that familiar wave of anger and betrayal surge up inside me. How could she do this to me? After everything, after the lies, the manipulation, and now this? The hearing started with Emma's lawyer presenting their case. He laid it out in the most manipulative way possible, painting Emma as this poor, vulnerable woman who had been abandoned by the man she thought she could trust. He made it sound like I had left her in the lurch, and now she was just trying to do what was best for her unborn child. I could feel my blood boiling as he spoke, but I kept my mouth shut. Robert had told me not to react, to let him handle everything. Finally, it was our turn. Robert stood up and, in his calm, measured tone, began dismantling their argument piece by piece. Your Honor, he began, my client, Mr. Matthews, is not the father of this child. Ms. Riley has admitted in the past that she was seeing another man, James Everett, during the time of conception. We are requesting a DNA test to prove that Mr. Matthews is not the biological father and should not be held financially responsible. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, turned to Emma's lawyer. Do you have any objections to a DNA test? Emma's lawyer shook his head. No, Your Honor. We're confident in our case. I almost laughed out loud. Confident? How could they be confident when we both knew the truth? The judge ordered the DNA test, and the court adjourned until the results were in. I left that courthouse feeling a strange mix of relief and anger. I knew the test would clear me, but the fact that Emma had dragged me through this at all was infuriating. How far was she willing to go to screw up my life? A week later, the DNA test results came back, and as expected, I wasn't the father. I wasn't surprised, but seeing it in writing brought a wave of relief. I thought this would be the end of it, but Emma wasn't done. At the follow-up hearing, where we expected the court to reject Emma's claim based on the DNA evidence, something unexpected happened. Emma's lawyer, clearly desperate at this point, stood up and made a last-ditch effort to keep me on the hook. Your Honor, he said, while the DNA results prove that Mr. Matthews is not the biological father, we argue that he has acted as a de facto parent during the course of their relationship. Ms. Riley believes that Mr. Matthews should still be financially responsible, as he led her to believe they would raise the child together. I stared at him, completely floored. De facto parent? We had broken up before she even told me she was pregnant. Robert was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, this claim is absurd. My client had no knowledge of the pregnancy until after the relationship ended, and Ms. Riley has been in a relationship with the biological father during the time of conception. There is no legal basis to hold Mr. Matthews accountable. The judge looked irritated, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Mr. Johnson, she said, addressing Emma's lawyer, you've provided no evidence to support your claim of Mr. Matthews acting as a de facto parent. The DNA test has proven he is not the biological father, and therefore, he has no legal obligation in this matter. Your request for child support is denied. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was over. Finally, it was over. But Emma wasn't done. As we left the courtroom, she ran after me, grabbing my arm. Liam, wait. Please, just listen to me. I pulled away, glaring at her. There's nothing left to say, Emma. You lost. It's over. Her face twisted with desperation. But we could have been a family, Liam. We could still be. You don't have to do this. I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. You seriously think I'm going to stay with you after everything you've done? After you tried to pin someone else's kid on me? I don't even recognize you anymore. She stood there, tears streaming down her face, but I didn't feel anything. I was numb. I'd spent months being angry, hurt, confused, but now, I was done. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, finally out of my life for good. It took a while to fully recover from everything Emma had put me through. The lies, the betrayal, the lawsuit. It all left me feeling drained, like I'd been through a war. But as the months went by, I started to feel like myself again. I focused on my job, reconnected with friends, and slowly, the pieces of my life began to fall back into place. Noah stuck by me through all of it, helping me laugh about the absurdity of the situation when I needed it most. He'd crack jokes about how I dodged a bullet, and even though it stung at first, eventually I found myself laughing along with him. I hadn't heard from Emma since that day outside the courthouse. She'd finally given up. And James? Well, from what I'd heard, he was still floating in and out of her life, not really stepping up as the father she'd hoped he would be. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I'd moved on, learned some hard lessons, and was ready for whatever came next. But one thing was for sure, I wasn't going to let anyone manipulate me like that ever again. It was supposed to be over. After the court rejected Emma's claim for child support, I thought that chapter of my life was finally closed. The DNA test had proven I wasn't the father, and the judge had shut down her ridiculous attempt to hold me responsible. I had walked out of the courthouse that day, feeling like I could finally breathe again. Emma, as far as I was concerned, was out of my life for good. But of course, she wasn't. For a while, things seemed to calm down. I went back to my routine, focused on work, and tried to rebuild my life. I wasn't naive enough to think it would be easy, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. It started small, with little whispers and rumors circulating among my friends and coworkers. At first, I brushed it off as the inevitable fallout from a messy breakup. People talk. They always do. But then it got worse. One Friday, Noah and I were grabbing drinks at the local bar. We were laughing about something stupid when his face suddenly went serious. Hey man, I need to ask you something, Noah said, leaning in a bit closer. I frowned. What's up? He hesitated for a second. Have you been talking to Emma? The question hit me like a punch in the gut. What? No. Why? Noah shifted uncomfortably. She's been telling people that you abandoned her and the baby. She's saying you're this deadbeat who left her to raise the kid on her own. I stared at him, my mind racing. What the hell? She knows that's not true. We literally went to court. The DNA test proved I'm not the father. Noah sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know, man, but she's been telling anyone who will listen that you bailed on her after promising to help. She's got a bunch of people believing you're the bad guy. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Emma, even after everything, was still out there spreading lies about me. She was twisting the story, making me out to be the villain. My blood boiled. How many more times was I going to have to fight this battle? Who else is she telling? I asked, my voice tight with anger. Noah shook his head. Dude, she's talked to a lot of people. Some of our old friends, some of your coworkers. I even heard she's trying to reach out to your family. I felt sick. My family? She's trying to manipulate my family now? Noah nodded, looking sympathetic. Yeah, man. I think she's desperate. I leaned back in my chair, running my hands through my hair. What am I supposed to do? I already proved in court that she's lying. How do I stop this? Noah leaned forward, his face serious. You don't. You just keep living your life. People will believe what they want, but the people who really know you, they'll stick by your side. The rest? Screw them. It was good advice, but it didn't make the situation any easier. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing the fallout from Emma's lies. Some old friends stopped texting. A coworker gave me a weird look when I walked into the break room. Even my parents called me one evening, asking why Emma had been trying to reach out to them. She said you haven't been returning her calls, my mom said over the phone, her voice cautious. Mom, I got a restraining order against her, I explained, trying to keep my frustration in check. She's lying. I'm not the father of her baby. You know that. My mom sighed. I know, honey. It's just, she seemed so sincere. That was Emma's game. She played sincere so well, twisting the truth to fit whatever narrative suited her best. And no matter how many times I tried to explain what had really happened, there were always people who were willing to believe her side of the story. Just when I thought I had reached my breaking point, something unexpected happened. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was out running errands, trying to keep my mind off everything. I had just finished grabbing some groceries when I heard someone call my name. Liam. I turned around, and to my shock, it was James. The James, Emma's ex. The guy who was actually the father of her baby. The last person I ever expected to see, let alone talk to. James jogged over, looking surprisingly nervous. Hey, man, do you have a second? I crossed my arms, wary of whatever he wanted. What do you want, James? He scratched the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. Look, I know I'm probably the last person you want to talk to, but I've been meaning to reach out to you. I wanted to talk about Emma. Hearing her name made me tense up immediately. What about her? James sighed, looking at the ground for a moment before meeting my eyes. She's been telling me all sorts of crap, trying to make me feel guilty, saying I need to step up and be more involved. She's manipulating me, Liam. Just like she manipulated you. I blinked, caught off guard by his honesty. You don't say, I replied sarcastically. James ran a hand through his hair. Look, I know I screwed up. I was seeing her when she was with you, and I regret it. I didn't realize how messed up she was until it was too late. Now she's got me trapped in this whole baby thing, and I don't know what to do. But I know one thing for sure. I don't want her to control my life anymore. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to punch the guy for getting involved with Emma in the first place, but another part of me understood exactly what he was going through. We had both fallen victim to her manipulation. She's been trying to ruin my life ever since the breakup, I admitted. She's telling people I abandoned her and the baby, even though it's not mine. James nodded. She's been doing the same thing to me, trying to guilt-trip me into being a part of her life again. But I'm done, man. I'm done letting her control me. I stared at him for a moment, then sighed. So what do we do? James looked relieved that I wasn't pushing him away. We move on. We stop letting her dictate how we live. I know it sounds simple, but it's the only way. I'm tired of being her puppet. It was strange, talking to James, the guy who had been at the center of everything that had torn my relationship apart. But in a weird way, it felt like closure. Like we were both finally ready to break free from the web of lies Emma had spun around us. After my conversation with James, something shifted inside me. I had spent months trapped in this endless cycle of anger, betrayal, and frustration. But now I was ready to move on. It wasn't easy, of course. Recovering from everything Emma had put me through took time. I had to learn how to trust people again, how to open up without fear of being manipulated. But slowly, I started to rebuild. One of the biggest changes I made was deciding to go back to school. I had always talked about finishing my degree, but had never really gotten around to it. Now, With everything that had happened, it felt like the right time to focus on myself and my future. I enrolled in college part-time, balancing classes with my job. It was tough at first, but it gave me something to focus on, something other than the chaos Emma had brought into my life. I started to meet new people, build new friendships, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my own life again. My relationship with Noah grew stronger, too. He had been by my side through everything, and now that I was finally moving on, he was there to help me find my footing again. We started hanging out more, going on weekend hikes, grabbing beers after work, and just talking about life. As the months went by, I realized I hadn't thought about Emma in weeks. The weight of her manipulation, the stress of the lawsuit, the lies she had spread, it had all started to fade into the background. She no longer had control over my life, and that realization was the most freeing feeling I'd ever experienced. The final step in my recovery came one day when I was sitting in a cafe, studying for an upcoming exam. My phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from an unknown number. "Liam, it's Emma. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, and I realize now how much I hurt you. I hope you can forgive me someday." I stared at the message for a long time. The old me would have been filled with anger, or maybe even tempted to respond. But now, I felt nothing. Emma was just a part of my past now, a chapter that had ended. I deleted the message without replying and went back to my studies. It's strange how life can change so drastically in such a short period of time. A year ago, I was stuck in a toxic relationship, manipulated by someone I thought I loved. Now, I was on my way to finishing my degree, building new friendships, and finally moving forward with my life. Emma? She was a distant memory. I didn't know what happened to her after the lawsuit and, frankly, I didn't care. She was no longer a part of my story. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like my story was my own.